Hello and welcome to Miniature Adventures. I'm Big Lee, and this week I want to talk about bringing newbies into the hobby. So this week's talking point: new players are the lifeblood of our hobby. Whether it be a wargaming or role-playing, the game cannot survive indefinitely without new recruits to fill the ranks as us experienced players get older. But introducing a new player to an established group is fraught with difficulties and uncertainty, both for the prospective gamer and the existing diehards. I mean, my own group, for instance, Postage Rejects, has grown over recent years, with a good proportion of its current members being relative newcomers. Some of them are returning to the hobby, but they've come and joined our group. And each time we brought in a new player, there was trepidation, to be fair, and each time our fears were allayed as we found ourselves a new friend. The anxiety must be quadrupled, of course, for the newbie joining an established group. For them, they are the outsider, unsure of the rules and the player dynamics into which they must find a niche for themselves. The feeling of being an outsider can be very intimidating, especially when you see a group of seasoned players who are comfortable with each other and with the game mechanics of their regular games. This challenge can deter many potential new players from fully embracing the hobby by joining a group. So how can a group of old hands make this introductory period easier for the new player? Well, a lot rests with the group's umpire and their style of running a game. They need to set a tone that can make a huge difference in how a new player perceives the group and the game itself. But it's also important that the group follows the umpire's lead during those first tentative games. To that end, it is crucial not only to discuss the new group, but also to brief everyone on the strategy for easing them into the game. So that here are my top tips for introducing new players into an existing gaming group. First, I would always say keep the rules simple and don't bombard a new player with complex rules, especially if they are new to wargaming. A brief overview of the rules is all that is needed at first, especially if being introduced to like an RPG game where rules can be played fast and loose. New players often find dense rule books overwhelming, and a simplified introduction can help them feel more at ease. And once the newbie has had a chance to enjoy their first game, you can start to introduce more complex ideas and rules later on. Often this will be initiated by the newbie themselves as they begin to see where rules are needed for the situation that they encounter. Now, the second tip I'd suggest is playing with a mentor. Now, this supports the first tactic. It's worthwhile pairing the new player with an established one. This mentorship approach can provide guidance without the pressure of a large group setting. Be careful though, because not every player makes a good mentor. So the chosen mentor should be patient, knowledgeable and supportive. They should encourage the new player to ask questions and make them feel comfortable at every turn. Next, you need to ensure active participation in their first game. If they spend the session on the sidelines while the old hands do everything, they'll pretty soon get bored and lose interest. Instead, give them something to do that makes them feel important to the progress of the game, and they will be hooked from the get-go. This could be a special role in the game or a task that is crucial for the team's success. Whatever it is, make them part of that first game. Next, make sure you create an inclusive atmosphere by going easy on the newbie for the first few sessions. Treat them like the guests they are. Be polite, gracious, supportive, perhaps dial down the banter a little bit to make them feel comfortable. No one wants to feel like they're the outsider in an established clique. Friends forged across the battlefield, metaphorically speaking, can be the strongest you will ever have, so give them a chance to flourish. Now next, make sure you encourage open communication within the group. Let the new player know that it's okay to ask questions, make mistakes and provide feedback. This open line of communication helps build trust and makes new players feel valued. Include them in email distribution lists, WhatsApp groups or other back channels so they can ask questions and be included in conversations. The group should also be open to feedback and willing to adjust their approach to better accommodate new players if necessary, certainly at least in the short term. And lastly, it's also important not to overlook long-term integration into the group. Looking after the new player shouldn't end after the first few sessions. I think it requires ongoing effort and attention if you want to make this newcomer into a regular and an ongoing member of the group. You want to keep them for a long time, in that they need to be mentored to stay with the group a long time. So as the new player becomes more comfortable with the game, gradually introduce more complex rules and strategies and encourage them to take on more significant roles within the game and the group. Even after the new player has grasped the basics, having a go-to person for more advanced questions and advice can be incredibly beneficial. This support helps the new player grow and develop their skills, contributing to the overall strength of the group. So having discussed my top tips for bringing new players into the group, I think it's worth reiterating the benefits of this activity. For a start, it injects fresh energy and perspectives into the gaming group, which can lead to new strategies, new approaches, new games. New players can challenge the status quo, encouraging creativity and innovation within a group that may otherwise have grown a little bit stale. Moreover, each new player helps expand the gaming community, which is a topic we've touched on many times before on this channel. By fostering a welcoming and inclusive environment, you contribute to the sustainability of the hobby that you love. Now, integrating new players into an established gaming group requires patience, support and a strategic approach. By simplifying the rules, pairing new players with mentors, ensuring active participation and fostering an inclusive atmosphere, you can help new players feel welcome and engaged from day one. The benefits of welcoming new players extend beyond the individual and the group itself, contributing to the growth and the sustainability of the gaming community as a whole, which of course brings us back to my question to you. If you have a regular gaming group or club, do you actively bring new blood into that group? And if you do, how do you make sure they fit in, stay in and thrive in your growing community of players? As always, I would love to hear what you think in the comments section below. So time for a hobby update. As you can tell from today's talking point, I'm a lot more organised this week compared to my off-the-cuff recording last weekend. But this also means my hobby update is a little longer than usual because I missed reporting back on a few things last week. So at the beginning of the week before, I joined several of the rejects online with Jonathan Freitag from the US for a game on Zoom. This time we were going way back to the age of Sumeria, and with two city-states fighting for dominance of a water source in a time of drought. We were using Basic Impetus version 2 and Jonathan had set up both sides across suitably arid looking hex terrain. I was playing with Richard while Steve and Ray took the opposing side, and the armies were pretty much mirror images of each other, so victory would go to the side which handled its troops the best, especially those lumbering but powerful war carts. Now these four-wheeled devices are sort of proto-chariots pulled by donkeys, ongers, composed of a woven basket mounted on wooden solid wheels. They weren't very manoeuvrable, but they were manned by a crew of two carrying battle axes and lances and pulled by a yoke of four ongers, these Asiatic asses, where they were a force not to be underestimated. In our game, once the light infantry had been neutralised and thrown back, the carts went in from both sides with what can only be described as variable effectiveness. For much of the game they were whirling around the battlefield in concentric circles, occasionally engaging each other in battle, then whirling away again to hit another target. The game went to the wire in the end, with both sides excruciatingly close to breaking, but in the end it was Ray and Steve that clung on the longest. A great game and yet another excellent evening hosted by Jonathan. Then later in the week my D&D group gathered again online for another thrilling and rather bloody instalment of our ongoing campaign. We've achieved our primary objective in our little side quest, and all that remains to do is escape without attracting the attention of the acid-spitting black dragon that's nearby. We are so dead. Let's just say our next game is going to be tense, exciting and in all probability very short. Then on Saturday, last weekend, saw the culmination of my work to bring the Battle of Bosworth to the Shed of War in glorious 6mm. I arrived at Stewart's a full 90 minutes ahead of the players, and I needed every minute of that to get set up. Thankfully I had organised my models and train and other paraphernalia for the game beforehand, so I finished bang on 10 AM ready for the game to start. Packing up was considerably easier, but it took me days to reorganise everything back into the correct boxes, but that's a subject for another day perhaps. Now, I put out a short video slideshow of the game earlier in the week, and if you want to know more about my planning and orders of battle, more pictures from the day, I recommend looking on my blog. I'll put the links in the box below. Likewise, Ray and Richard put together 2 excellent posts with their own photos of the game, and I highly recommend taking a look at them as well. Again, links will be in the description below. Now, the location of the Battle of Bosworth has been debated and plotted by antiquarians and historians many times in the 539 years since the battle took place. For several hundred years it was linked to Ambion Hill, where Richard probably camped the night before the battle. This seems logical because it's one of the highest points in this semicircular range of hills. There is a water source there, and good visibility for miles around. However, few artefacts have been definitively found to tie the battle to this location, and core samples of the surrounding terrain revealed no evidence of the now infamous marsh in which Richard is supposed to have lost his life. So between August 2005 and August 2009, the Battlefields Trust undertook a major new study of Bosworth battlefield on behalf of Leicestershire County Council. Combined with new analysis of documentary sources, this analysis shifted the location of the battle away from the traditional site to a position 2.5 miles southeast, either side of what is known as Fen Lane, the old Roman road. A wealth of artefacts were uncovered, including the single largest collection of medieval cannonballs ever found, numerous sword hilts, buckles, spurs, horse tackle, and the by now famous boar badge, which would have been worn by one of the king's closest entourage. All of these have definitively identified the site of the engagement and indicated the orientation of the battles, the location of the guns, and even the location of the infamous marsh. My game is based on this most recent interpretation of the evidence. However, that's not to say I didn't have to make some concessions to playability with regard to terrain, deployment and other factors. The terrain had to be both squeezed and stretched into various places to make it fit on a 6x4 footprint, but also to accommodate the size of the armies that I'd put together. And in order to ensure that all the players had something to do, I could only give a nod to the non-participation of Northumberland and the seeming reluctant participation of the Stanleys. This latter decision is the only part of the game where I'm not entirely happy with the outcome, and that's entirely down to me. The scenario has both forces' participation determined by the turn of a show your colours card and rolling a 9+ on a d12, with modifiers of course, to release them for action. Now, I made some adjustments to make it easier for both sides to participate, but in my mind's eye I vastly underappreciated how long this would take to actually happen. So Richard, commanding Northumberland, and Stuart, commanding the Stanleys, spent at least half of the game just waiting to get started. So I'm really sorry for that, but there you go. That's what you work out in your mind's eye isn't quite always the case when you get it on the games table. Now, both of these players did eventually get to move their troops, but the game probably wasn't as entertaining for them as it was for Ray, Sergeant and Steve. With hindsight, I should have adopted a much simpler mechanism for participation, getting them involved much earlier with just a nod to the historical reluctance of both commanders to commit to the fight. Now, I do plan on bringing Bosworth back to the shed another time, assuming the positive reception I got from the rejects was genuine. There's a lot of alternative terrain layouts suggested by earlier maps that I could choose from, but I've come up with an alternative what if scenario, and I've already worked out some of the details. So what if Richard III's spies had been able to give him more notice of Henry's advance and indicated the close proximity of the Stanleys? Would the king have been tempted to advance to confront Henry earlier in his march, possibly trying to deny him time to secure an alliance with the unreliable Stanleys? Maybe instead of historians talking about the Battle of Bosworth, we will be discussing the Battle of Lichfield instead. Keep your eyes peeled, that game will be coming in a few months' time. Well, that's all we have time for today, but as always, please join the conversation in the comments below. I really do enjoy reading them. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe and share, and click on the bell notification icon to be notified when I publish new content. I'd also recommend keeping an eye on the community tab on the channel, as I often post extra material and pictures there in between posting the videos. So until next week, stay safe, keep gaming, and of course, keep rolling dice.